Now, this is not a book about any kind of political intrigue so much as psychological intrigue. I got this book. This is The Assault on Truth by Jeffrey, and I'm not going to get this dude's middle name right, so I'm just going to skip it. Jeffrey Masson, Masson. Don't know if that's right or not, but this is the subtitle here is Freud's Suppression of the Seduction Theory. And I got this as part of my research into some of the weirder things like the Franklin scandal, a lot of the child sexual abuse. This popped up several times. Several other authors cited this as a good book to help you understand kind of the history of how sexual abuse and sexual abuse allegations have been suppressed by a lot of people over the years. And this goes back, well over 100 years into the late Victorian era. In this, Jeffrey Masson here I believe he was in charge of Freud's library. He had some role in maintaining Freud's library of his papers and all that. And that was how he stumbled across this, that some of Freud's original writings, his original paper that he wrote, and he has that included in this, was a paper on what he called the seduction theory. And what the seduction theory was a theory that he believed that Freud, and this is Sigmund Freud, that Freud originally believed that adult neurosis or adult hysteria was almost always a byproduct of child sexual abuse. That in his patients that he was seeing in Vienna at the time, that almost to a person, all of these people that were suffering these severe neurosis were all victims of child sexual abuse. And so he wrote this paper about basically the origins of, I forget how he words his original paper, and you could probably find that paper on in PDF format online somewhere. But the interesting thing about, and what he tells the history of here, is Freud wrote this paper in the late 1800s. I want to say it was like 1897, somewhere around there. Wrote this paper and presented it to his peers at the time, and was immediately shut down and basically told in blunt terms, like, you cannot push this theory. You cannot bring this, you cannot publicize this. If you do, this is going to be a big problem, because Freud's clientele was wealthy socialites and the upper crust of Austrian society. So if he was to come out with this, it's not like he's talking about a problem occurring in trailer homes. He's talking about the wealthy elite of the day, and that there is a severe problem in these high circles of child sexual abuse. That obviously, even today in 2022, that's obviously still a very big problem of even getting people to admit that such things occur, let alone then address them and bring people to account for that. So there's also some very odd, in some of his letters about some of these cases, there's some references that sound suspiciously like what was later labeled ritual abuse. So very fascinating stuff there. But the biggest thing in this is that you have Freud coming out with this theory saying, hey guys, I figured this out. I figured out where this adult neurosis comes from. It's from the moms and dads, both parents. He points the finger at both men and women abusers in this, which is also something that was unheard of at the time. That he had men and women abusers that were abusing their children, thus creating these adult psychological problems. So he presents this, he's shut down, and Freud decides, you know what? Which side is my bread buttered on? Oh, that side? Okay. So he drops it, and instead he basically divorces himself from that theory and says, nope, that was wrong, had it all wrong. It's actually the kids imagining it. It's actually them imagining these feelings that they have towards their mom or towards their dad. They're actually secretly attracted to mom and dad, and it's their fantasies they're playing out that's causing this. And that is what we're left with today, which that I think is worth digging into a little bit, because that's kind of nuts when you really think about it. That is the classic blaming the victim. You're saying, hey, we know that Sally here is having these crazy thoughts about her dad and all, but it turns out it's just because she was secretly fantasizing about wanting to be with her dad. It's not that dad did anything to her. So the whole book is essentially the story of how Freud suppressed this in favor of his career. And Mr. Masson here, pictured on the back of the book, talks about how his entire worldview shifted knowing this. And this makes for a very troubling read. Some of the accounts he gives and some of the letters he cites in this and some of the cases are really, really difficult to read. Some of the contemporary child abuse cases that you read about in here are pretty rough. And to know that Freud knowingly turned away from this, something that could have helped his patients, is really troubling. To see someone make a conscious decision to say, the victims are going to have to play second fiddle to my career, and so be it. So anyway, The Assault on Truth. Also some interesting stuff about one of his students. Later on, he talks about one of his students. One of Freud's students came to an identical conclusion. And Freud shot him down, and when he refused to budge on that theory, the same theory that Freud had, Freud basically pushed him out and said, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with you anymore. So that's a fascinating part of this as well. So if you're into that sort of thing, if you're trying to unravel a lot of that, especially if you are intrigued by the political dynamics of the Me Too movement and all, really, really important literature here. Also, as a little aside about ESP, one of Freud's students, and I believe it was the student that was kind of shoved out because he wouldn't back down, he has an interesting theory that he proposes about ESP and people who seem to have psychic capabilities. And his theory is, and I'm going to summarize and probably butcher this horribly because I think when I read this has been probably 8 or 9 years. But he believes that a lot of what appears to be a psychic phenomenon is actually highly intuitive people. And he believes that intuition was created under abusive circumstances, that children that were subject to really abusive households became really intuitive and learned to anticipate what was going to happen in their household to avoid the abuse. And that under those circumstances, there's a lot of that intuition that becomes so strong and so second nature that it almost appears to be a sort of psychic phenomenon. So I'll leave it at that. I know I'm probably not going to do that justice, but anyway, fascinating book, important in that to really understand that kind of the bedrock of our modern, the modern psychotherapy landscape is is really upended by this book. And that's why I think there's a lot of people that had problems with him writing this, because it really upended the way people think about child sexual abuse and its impact on adult life. So anyway, The Assault on Truth by Jeffrey, however you say his name, Masson. Really good stuff. Again, very dark read. It's not an entertaining read at all, but really important read, especially if you are into any kind of mental health issues like this.